Welcome to Experts Live India 2024. I'm so proud and happy to be with you here and to present you about NiCE and give you our sponsor session remotely. My name is Christian Heidkamp. I'm responsible for the product management and principal architect developing key solution that we bring into the market. And I will give you an insight about what we have been doing over so many years, fulfilling the requirements of customers worldwide. To start, I have prepared a couple of slides for you, and also we go into a live demo. So I will actually just give you a glimpse how we've been working over so many years. Our key requirement is developing software. It's not solution, it's software. So something we ship and a customer can use. We give it to consultants, to service providers, and they use it in their toolbox basically to really complete the customer requirement. Obviously, all our partners and all our customers are Microsoft customers. So that's why it's great to be here at the Microsoft location today and talk about what can be done to bring more customers and partners on board into Microsoft and the Azure platform. Basically, we have a global customer reach. So here from India, we have customers going far to the east and going all the ways to Hawaii, to the west, customers of us sitting in many places. We have office location in the United States, and I'm sitting in our headquarters today in Germany, where we actually do most of our development. You might wonder what are these technology partners here on the right side are doing. So we have an Oracle partner, right? So why do we have an Oracle partner? Because our clients use Oracle software. And Oracle software is also used by other Microsoft customers. And that's basically where we come into play. We basically build connections between major players. So if somebody has an Oracle cloud control environment, for example, the cloud control details need to go into Azure Monitor. So you need to know cloud control on Oracle, and you need to know Microsoft ecosystem and to bring this together. And that's basically where our business sense and business purpose comes into play. And it's not only Oracle, it's also IBM, Micro Focus, VMware, and HCL. Especially about VMware, I'll talk a bit about details because it's a really important partner for us now with Broadcom, even more expanding its scope. Well, let's talk a bit about the building blocks we're using to build our solution so that you understand a bit more where we're coming from and how we do this. So we start at the bottom of the slide. And at the bottom of the slide, Microsoft and Azure and all the technologies or some of the technologies we use in our products are listed here. And probably the most important for us is the Azure Monitor SCOM managed instance. It's a new set which just was coming into GA in November last year. So before it was in preview quite a while, and obviously the System Center Operations Manager, which SCOM stands for, has been around since 2005. So it's a really trusted and well-known and reliable product that was basically brought into Azure and is now available there. We have literally hundreds of customers which build on that. But it is now part of Azure Monitor, and we do integrate with Azure Monitor, and we integrate with other components like Azure Arc, Entra ID, and Cosmo DB. I'll talk about the custom case in a moment, but really to give you an overview of how fitting things together, I like to add one more layer here, which is the gray layer in the middle. So where we have third-party APIs, basically. So, well, today you always need some kind of integration point, and we're in a API REST world, basically, where we do integrate between different components. And in the middle is probably our most important one, Microsoft Graph. And I've seen there are a couple of sessions coming here today on Microsoft Graph. So we are really excited about this. We've been started from the beginning already when Graph was even in beta versions, because it wasn't released at all and has really bumpy and had only a few functionalities in there. We had the first release in 2018 already of a software that was built on it, obviously using a number of other APIs to make it complete. But now with Microsoft Graph, it's so powerful and make it really great to integrate different components. It is really a cornerstone of our solutions. Right. We build solutions basically on those APIs, and the most important one we talk about is the Active 365 Monitor. And the Active 365 Monitor brings together Microsoft Teams, Office 365 or Microsoft 365 products, and brings all the data which is in there for monitoring. Again, it's really about monitoring into another ecosystem, into Azure Monitor, and brings a completeness of solution to provide the complete monitoring. We have integrations for IBM Power, DB2, really exotic system, because we know the enterprise of today is not using one vendor. That's just realistic. They're not 100% Microsoft. And there are other there's SAP in there is ServiceNow, there are a lot of other vendors. And we need to, at one point, still have a completeness of overview of what's going on in a monitoring environment to understand how healthy our business is. Let's start with the customer use story. So this talks about a customer story of a telecom provider here in Europe. And this telecom provider is providing services to their clients. So it's basically selling services around telephony and relies on Microsoft Teams for that. To do that, actually, they need to have understanding how their clients are using the product, their service, so their telephony. So how long they're calling, how much they're using the adaption, how good they are with the product. So for that, actually, they needed some monitoring. Also, obviously, if things work, if something breaks, if somebody calls their service desk and says, oh, hello, I have a problem, my Teams call didn't work or was dropped, and then, well, what do you do, right? So you can go to the Teams quality dashboard. So some of you here today might be familiar with that. I suppose most of you using Microsoft Teams. If you're not, that will be strange, right? So, but anyway, if you're using Microsoft Teams, there's the Teams Admin Center. In the Teams Admin Center, you have the call quality dashboard, which gives like a really lot of information already. But you can't access the data directly, which is used by the Teams quality dashboard. Graph API doesn't give that option. The only way you can get this data is basically by collecting these Teams record call quality records, the records which are caused by every call you're doing, by every meeting you're doing. Every participant of the meeting writes a call record, and this call record is stored in a telemetry database. And again, this telemetry database can't be accessed directly. You need to know which call record you want to pull out, and then you can look at it. So what we actually did is pulling out all Teams call record for a specific tenant and placing them in another database. In this case, we're placing them in a CosmoDB database, and then we can basically analyze whatever we like on all the Teams call records. And I'm going to show in a moment how we did that. But before we get there, I will give you a short introduction into the overview of the SCOM managed instance. As I mentioned, this is new. It just became GA. And as it became GA, it has been more adapted now by clients. It's easy to deploy. It has really good pre-checks to make sure all the prerequisites are fulfilled. And once you go to your Azure portal, put in SCOM or Azure Monitor SCOM Managed Instance, you can deploy it from there. It has prerequisites. So it does require an on-premise component. So on the left side here, you see, for example, the domain servers, the web consoles, the agents, and that's on-prem requirement. So you also need a linkage between your on-prem environment and Azure. That can be a VPN, or it can be typically express route as well. So in larger deployments, and then once you're on the Azure part, we have the central component here, the SQL managed instance, which is really lighting fast. I've always been amazed when I deploy that and see it in action. The SQL managed instance is so great. Really, it's fast, it's effective, it's always there. So on that, basically on top, we have a scale set, and within the scale set, we have the management servers, and the management servers who sit in there basically do the actual work. They connect back to the agents that communicate with the management servers, and then they bring the data into SQL managed instance. You have a front end, the portal UI, that basically makes up the monitoring environment. On the other side, you have Azure Monitor, which you're familiar with as well, probably more familiar than the SCOM managed instance. They extend each other, they integrate with each other. The real difference is that this has a complete on-prem and hybrid focus. The SCOM managed instance plus it has a service model. It has underneath a discovery which builds up a model of your entire application and IT infrastructure, including linkages, network devices. You basically can bring it in, represent them as object of a service model, and attach health monitoring or monitors to it, including performance monitoring. So that basically makes the SCOM managed instance deployment. So now back to the requirement or the story. Like we have that service provider wants to monitor their teams and will bring the data into that. So how do we run with the monitoring here? So the monitoring is done with something we call the Teams Call Record Collector. The Teams Call Record Collector is actually an Azure function. So plus it has a binary to it, which actually does some calculations as well. So whenever there's a Teams call or somebody takes part of a meeting and hangs up or starts it, a Teams record is created. And when it's completed, it's stored in telemetry database. And we can actually have a trigger who actually informs us, yes, there's a Teams call record stored. Please give me the call record ID, fetch it, and place it into the Cosmo DB. So the Cosmo DB is basically this on the left side here. And then we have the full database of all the Teams call records. So we can aggregate them. We actually create a REST API for those. So our own API basically to query from that. And so we can pull it out and bring it into some other place. So all the data is owned basically by the owner of the subscription, where the TC or the resource, where the TCRC database is in there, and it's really secure. It's locked. You know, Azure security. You can probably lock it down, whatever you like. I have a bit more detailed architecture. I'm not going to more into details here, but key part is here at the top, Microsoft Teams, right? And then it goes down. It actually has an ingress where the data goes into the Cosmo DB. It has a queue. It has a subscription. It has a webhook where it gets the Teams call record ID. But it is key. Basically, everything is around the Cosmo DB here in the middle. So now we have one part here on the right side, which I want to explain still, because once the data in the Cosmo DB is, we want to get it out into a monitoring product. So which can be Azure Monitor, it can be the SCOM managed instance, well, you name it. It could be also something else, right? It is. We also bring it to a Redis cache, Azure Redis cache rig. We can provide it in there, so you can basically do whatever you like with your data. And then from here, I will show you later in the demo how this data actually gets into Azure Monitor. And in Azure Monitor, we can visualize then, for example, how long did all the calls yesterday were in your tenant. So that data is in there, and then we can drill down from that even deeper than what you can do in the call quality dashboard. So with that, we'll give you a short demo, and I'll actually start off with the SCOM managed instance. So give me a moment to actually come up with the demo system. There we go. I hope you can see this. We'll just going to the SCOM managed instance first. All right. You see, if you haven't seen that before in your Azure portal, go in, just type SCOM managed instance, and look for SCOM managed instance. The deployment is a process which takes some time. So I have given webinars on that topic. So go out to YouTube or to our website and look them up. So there are pitfalls, tips and tricks you can do, but it's really key that you do some preparations before you start the process. Once you have deployed it, you can actually open the SCOM managed instance here, and yeah, it basically is deployed to a number of resources. You can connect to a load balancer. When you connect to a load balancer, you can use as a web front end, or you can use a standard front end. This is basically one front end, which is a client where you see the monitoring of the entire system. This is running on your system, or you can also use a web-based console for that. Behind that, we have some infrastructure. The most important part already mentioned is the SQL managed instance. And the SQL managed instance is really fast and performing. So it will never give you a bottleneck if you size it right. The second part on here is the scale set, which I will quickly open here. So this scale set is a VM scale set, and you have a number of instances. Typically, you should have at least 2 in there for high availability. For cost reason, I just put in 1 in here. So there's one management server. This one management server is a Windows managed server of a specific size you can use for that, and you can actually connect to that with the credentials. The credentials are managed basically by your on-prem AD. So this is still called, I think, it's still called Active Directory. So, so in this Active Directory, if you have a user in there, you can actually log with that user into that Azure VM, because there's a trust. It's basically in the same domain here, or subdomain, depending on your configuration. And once that is done, basically, you have set up this environment. You can connect to it, and it typically behaves as a traditional system center environment, as you might have known it before. Then basically all the monitoring information comes into that, and you can use, and I will quickly show this how this is displaying here. So if we mentioned about Microsoft Teams and go to Microsoft Teams performance. So let's say we would like to understand the total duration of calls per day per hour. So here we go. We have just short data on here because I started this up. So we will see more data when we get to the Azure Monitor in a moment. Or we could see, for example, the chat availability, which is a probe. So we probe actually if the chat is working, how long it takes, and it also gives us some data. There is actually a robot basically which automatically chats between one user and another, and that creates the statistic data. So it's real synthetic. That's why we sometimes call our products also active products or Active 365 Monitor. All right, so but let's leave that ugly console away, I know. So, and go in Azure to the Azure Monitor. There we go. And in the Azure Monitor, I have a resource, which is an application insight resource, and we have like the metric set. And let me just move this aside. And here we have a custom namespace. So that's important probably to point out. So we ingest this data into from the TCRC, from the call collector, wire like another collector into this. And here we have then the data which is represented. So for example, again, if you're looking the time of Teams call duration. So if you want to understand the total duration in hours, so we see it's between 600 and 700 hours per 24 hours. If you look like, for example, last 3 days, probably it's not going to much change. It's pretty much the same all the day. So we have the number of calls here. If we look for a longer time over the weekend, for example, it would go down. But we also can look at, for example, like average jitter, like or call quality, basically how much delay we, for example, have in here. And that ranges between, we see 2 and 15. And we really see, we have a very insight of how our Teams is performing and how this is based on the real records, right? Remember, this is real records. This is not data which we have from one specific probe. And then this data comes from the Cosmo DB, as I explained earlier. So we could go now into the Cosmo DB and look into the Cosmo DB and understand why we had so much jitter, which users were affected by this, which location, which network, and understand these type of details. I'm not going to go into this session now into the details also to private data, because we can actually see names and those types of things here. On that level, we don't have any names or locations of persons in the tenant visible. All right, so let's go back to the slides and have a look. How does this affect, like, well, this is a new service in Azure, right? So you might not so be familiar with that, so I just want to give you a quick overview about the Azure consumption cost. How much does it cost to do this type of monitoring on Azure? So Azure with the service has the SCOM managed instance, and it's primarily priced per endpoint. So an endpoint is basically an agent-based endpoint. So let's say this is a VM, a Linux VM or Windows VM, and it can be either on Azure, it can be on-prem, it can be on AWS. It doesn't matter. It just has a line of sight or has a connection into that. It can also be like from a gateway, which is sitting somewhere like a system center gateway and reaching into another network. So we have customers which have 30,000 or more endpoints in this environment, right? So they bring data from many different places into this. And with that, you have a price point of $6 per month. And that is basically the base cost, which includes all the features and functionalities, including monitoring of Active Directory, of Azure resources, but also other workloads like if you have an Exchange on-prem or SQL Server somewhere, SQL managed instance, everything goes into this place. Is this covered and monitored? That's all included into that. Plus, there are more management packs also for Azure Stack HCI, for example. All of this information can be brought into that. And then we have on the other side the consumption cost, which is the major part. You see this big yellow part down here, right? So which is, well, here in Europe we have euros, so we have 11.86 € per day for consuming the SQL managed instance. So that's the recommended sizing here. So, and which brings us to the cost around 20+ euro per day running this in a production environment up to 2,000 endpoints. So further we go beyond that, obviously you might require a larger SQL managed instance or more management server in that set. So that basically encompasses the entire monitoring for that. So with that, basically, we have the understanding of the cost, and let me go a bit further. And yeah, basically, as a summary, I really want to encourage you here to join us for our monitoring and automation webinar we're bringing up. So because monitoring is one piece, right? But once you have monitoring and you see a problem, you want to automate this in the next step. So let's say, for example, a virtual machine, a system has a problem, you want to reprovisioning, want to restart it, or want to do some specific action, you need your automation. And so we put together with a partner of us a monitoring and automation webinar, which we're running in 2 weeks, a live webinar together with Calvarian. Calvarian might be known to some of you as in the automation space, which do Azure automation, also use the System Center Orchestrator product for automation, really bring like hybrid cloud automation. And we combine this with the monitoring component. So let's say you have a monitoring that creates an alert, and you can trigger an automation from that. Really bringing this together. This is the idea of this webinar. So I put the QR code up here, and take a photo or sign up. Would be really happy to welcome you on that webinar. It will be recorded and provided thereafter as well. So yes, with that, I think I'm coming to the end of my presentation here today. It's been really a pleasure talking to you here, and I'll send a lot of greetings from far to the west from here from central Germany. And thank you very much, and enjoy the day of the conference. Learn a lot. Keep my fingers crossed, and see you soon. Thank you.